Thanks. We can talk more later. Hey Phil, think they're ready? I don't know. I don't know if they're ready. Okay. Good evening. So this evening, my name is Michael McVaugh. I'm with the Colorado Department of Transportation. I'm the region director for Southwest Colorado. And tonight we're going to talk about the ballot measures that may affect highway funding in Colorado. So I'm going to go through this tonight. Feel free, if you have a question, ask me a question. I'm going to try to remember to repeat it, just so it goes into the microphone, because this is being recorded tonight. And so that the people that are watching it later can hear what your question was at. Do not hesitate to ask a question. I'll be happy to try to answer it as we go. Turn up the volume more. Hopefully the microphones are working, but I will speak louder. Okay, maybe I just got to get closer. All right. So going from this tonight, we're going to give you some history, some background of where transportation funding's been, where the gas tax is spent, how much gas tax is collected, and we'll go through there. So one of the things that's focused for CDOT is, are people moving people easily, moving goods and services easily. And I'll get into a little more detail. Most of our goods and services are moved across our highways now. We don't have a lot of rail lines, et cetera, to move transportation and goods around Colorado, and we rely on the highways for this. The big focuses that we have, particularly in Southwest Colorado, is tourism and our energy industry, and oil and gas, CO2, coal mines, and then of course Mesa Verde, the train in Durango, and just the mountains the mountains themselves generate a lot of traffic coming into Colorado. I know in some of our roadways within Colorado, particularly Southwest Colorado, in the summer our traffic goes up almost 25% because of the tourism industry that we work with here. One of the things that you look at when you're looking at our highways, if we can reduce congestion by 10% on our highways, we can actually improve the economic growth in Colorado by 1% just by making that change and making our roads more accessible and more traversable. Now this is where it gets really interesting. When you start looking up here and you see the semi-truck with 75T in it, or 75 tons, that is the amount of goods and materials that are transported across the highways in Colorado each year for every resident of Colorado. When you start thinking about that, you're like, how could that be 75 tons? But when you think about all the groceries that are hauled into the Cortez area and Southwest Colorado, the fuels that are hauled in for people to drive their vehicles around, auto parts, it just goes on and on. The agricultural products that are moved in and out, 75 tons per person is what goes across our highways every year. The other piece of it is most of our budget right now is going to maintaining what we have. 23,000 lane miles of highways in Colorado, 35 mountain passes, a third of those are in Southwest Colorado, the region that we live in. 278 avalanche paths that actually impact our highways. About 80% of those are in Southwest Colorado when you look at Wolf Creek Pass, Mollis, Red Mountain, Coal Bank Pass, and of course Lizard Head Pass. That's where the majority of all the avalanche paths in Colorado are that we maintain and take care of. But CDOT isn't just about maintaining highways. We take care of all of our airports. We collect fuel sales tax on airplanes that help pay for all the airports in the state. And that's where that money directly goes. And then we have multimodal, and we're really working on trying to grow out the Greyhound system and the Trailways lines that were abandoned many years ago by private industry with our new Bustang program that, you know, we have the Bustang Outrider now that comes from Durango over to this area, on up through Ridgeway and on to Grand Junction every day. So there's so much that we do other than just maintaining highways. Kind of going back into the past. In 1991 was the last time we had an increase in sales or in gas tax in Colorado. And that is 22 cents per gallon that is collected from the state, and 18.4 cents a gallon that is collected by the federal government. 1991 was the last time that changed. In 1991, we only had 3 million people in Colorado, and we spend about $125 per person in Colorado in 1991. We've had no change in revenue coming in, and today in 2017, 2018, we have almost 6 million people in Colorado, and now we're only spending about $68 per person when we do this, with the revenue that we have. I had a person earlier today in another presentation ask me, why aren't you collecting more gas tax? There's more people. And well, the comparison that I give to people is in 1991, I had a 1985 Chevy that got 9 miles to the gallon. Today, I have a 2003 Chevy that gets 20 miles to the gallon. So I'm actually using less gas today with my truck than I did in 1991. Every vehicle has gotten more fuel efficient, some more than twofold efficient. And so we're not consuming more gas today than we were in 1991. And since it is cents per gallon, the same amount of revenue is basically coming in today that we got in 1991. So where does our money go? Currently, what you're looking at here on this graph, on the left-hand side in the green and the blue, is the revenues that come into CDOT every year. So 42% of our revenue, it comes from federal gas tax, about $650 million a year. 20% comes from the state gas tax, $321 million a year. And then the registration fees kind of wrap around on the left-hand side where it says 7.4, 7.2, and 7.2%. Those are the registration fees that we collect. And that amounts to about $224 million a year. Half of it goes to bridge replacements, replacing bridges that are in poor condition, and it can only be used to replace poor bridges. The other half goes to safety on our roads, and I'll detail more where that safety money goes later. But we're focusing on safety and bridges. That's what the direction was for those fees. All told, that pie amounts to about $1.5 billion annually that CDOT spends on our roadways. Over on the right-hand side, it shows where we spend it. 48% of that $1.5 billion, or $747 million, goes into just maintaining our roads, plowing them, fixing potholes, crack sealing, doing general maintenance and upkeep of our roads, not improving them or making them better. It's just maintaining what we've got. And then it kind of goes through a number of elements, but down in the bottom right corner, you'll see 5.8% in the brighter red. That is actually the only money we have right now out of $1.5 billion to expand our system, to actually make more lanes. And that's about $89 million a year. The trend has happened over the years that we are now at a point that we're putting more money into maintaining what we got, and because we don't have new revenue, we don't have the means to expand or reconstruct our roads. So that's why this came about this year, and this has been going on for several years, was how do we get more funding for highways? You know, we basically don't have the ability to start improving or growing our system anymore. So several years ago, we started working on a list of projects. We were asked to do this to identify major projects that need to be built that are not funded. And we came up with a $10 billion list, which is about $1 billion a year if you think about it, ideally. We then were approached for Proposition 110 by a group of stakeholders, Denver Metro Mayors, Colorado Contractors Association, and a number of other people, and they said, if we were to put a sales tax together, could you develop a project list for us? So we went into that $10 billion list, kind of sat down, looked at some of the polling they were telling us. They kind of said, you know, we can't do 10 billion. The public probably won't stand for that, but based on the polling, we could probably do the $6 to $7 billion range for projects to improve our highways and grow our highways. So we came up with that dark green bar on the left. That's a $7 billion project list. I actually forgot to get this out tonight, Lisa, but over in my bag, I have all the projects that are lined out. Now, some of you tonight have picked up a handout that looks like this, and it has some columns. So you'll see this. This actually identifies in the yellow column that you have tonight, and sorry about the small print, but the yellow column is all of the 110 projects that we've identified for Region 5, Southwest Colorado. The green column next to that is the 109 project list that you can get. So you can kind of compare what 109 would bring to Southwest Colorado and what 110 would bring to Southwest Colorado. Proposition 110 is a 0.62% sales tax. To give you an idea what that means is for every $10 you spend, you would pay 6 cents more in sales tax than you do today. So a $10 investment is 6 cents towards transportation. Now, the one thing about Proposition 110 is it shows, up here you'll see, Proposition 110 combined with what they call Senate Bill 267 that the legislature passed last year, and then some general fund transfers that they gave us in 19 and 20 will generate about $9 billion total. We have a $7 billion list though. Where's the other $2 billion going to go, you ask? Well, part of it is we want to take that extra money that would be generated and put it back into assets, to maintaining what we got. We're having a hard time right now at $748 million a year, maintaining what we have, and the roads are actually getting worse. They're not getting better. They're not staying the same. And so we would take that additional funding just to do maintenance of our assets. The Proposition 109 team, they came together, and this would be taking general fund money, basically directing the state legislature, if it's passed by the public, to take $300 million out of the general fund, and that's what's coming out of your property taxes today, and that $300 million would be used to bond up to about $4 billion for projects, $3.5 billion for projects. That is that middle column, the middle height yellow bar. Proposition 109 actually reduces the amount of Senate Bill 267 funds that CDOT would get. The difference between 109 and 110. 110 has that orange, the larger orange bar. That is 4 years of Senate Bill 267 funding, which is bonding against state properties. 110 keeps that. 109 would eliminate the additional years. We've already received 1 year of Senate Bill 267 funding, and that's the little part of the bar. The other 3 years would be eliminated, and that's why it's smaller. So 109, $3.5 billion list. 109, they did go out and they went into the list that we have here, and they chose what projects they would do. One of the differences between 109 and 110 is in 110, they gave us a little time and they said, what projects would CDOT prefer to do? And so we looked at that, and in Region 5, I looked at geographic equity and trying to share the money around 15 counties. In 109, they didn't ask us, they went to the list and they chose the projects off the list, and they didn't really get CDOT's feedback. So when you start looking at the 109 and 110 list, you'll see There may be a lot more projects happening in the Durango area, La Plata County, Archuleta County, and not happening so far out. 110 looks at spreading the wealth and getting it out throughout the region. So that was one of the differences that we see, but that's where 109, they chose what they wanted. 110 took some feedback from CDOT on what we thought should be done. Now, if 109 passes, you see, roughly 4 billion, 110 passes, roughly 9 billion. If neither one of those pass, the legislature this year, when they did Senate Bill 267, or no, excuse me, Senate Bill 1, which is the general fund transfers, they said if neither one of these pass, then next year, the legislature in 2019 will have to pass a referendum to fund transportation. So they would have to pass that. They would have to take it before the voters next year. And that third yellow bar to the right, the smaller of the bars, generates about $2.5 to $3 billion. That would be what next year's referendum would be, that you would be voting on next November if 109 and 110 do not pass. One of the questions people have asked recently is, well, what if they both pass? What if 109 and 110 do pass? One of the dilemmas that you can see very quickly in this chart, when you look at the Senate Bill 267, 110 says, let's keep all of 267 for 4 years. 109 says, we're only going to keep the first year. That's immediately a conflict. And because there could be conflicts in the way those two are written, they will have to take both that passed, take them to the state courts, and let the courts review those and determine which one, if there truly is a conflict. If there truly is a conflict, then they will go to a decision that whichever one had more votes by the public will be the one that passes and the other one will be eliminated. And the courts will decide that, not us. So that's what could happen. If there is no conflict, and I don't know what the outcome of that will be, if they decide, no, it's not that much of a conflict, they can both go forwards. The courts could decide to do that, and both could end up funding transportation. I don't have an answer how we'll do that if both come through. We haven't really looked at that. We've looked at if one passes or the other passes, not if both pass. So that's kind of what would happen if they both pass. So we're just not sure where that's going to go. If Proposition 110 fails, if Proposition 109 fails, if the 2019 ballot measure from the legislature, the referendum, fails, then we have the final column on the right where Senate Bill 267 still exists. Senate Bill 267 generates about $2 to $2.5 billion in funding for CDOT. One of the things about Senate Bill 267 that people don't realize is that CDOT is required to help pay off the bonding that would be used there. Our commitment initially for paying off that bonding is $50 million a year. So if you go back to that $1.5 billion budget that we're talking about, we would have to trim $50 million out of there each year to pay down some of that debt. The legislature has committed that they will pay $100 million of that debt, and they'll have to take that out of the general fund. So it's a $150 million payment that would be looked at there. So that would be the commitment, that this doesn't show that, okay, we're getting some money, but over the time, $2.5 billion gain, CDOT at 20 years at $50 million a year is $1 billion payment that we will have to make. So we're only getting about a net $1.5 billion improvement, because we will be trimming other programs to make this happen. Okay, here. Did I go too far? That was slow. There we go. Okay, so here's a different example of what 109 and 110 will do. 110 is the green bars, okay? 110 will help fund highways at 45% of the total revenue collected. So the 0.62% sales tax, 45% of that revenue goes to CDOT and to highways. 15% of it will go to multimodal, which is transit, bicycle, and pedestrian improvements. And that'll amount to almost $2 billion for bike, ped, and transit improvements. And then the other difference, the local portion, is actually what would go to cities and counties. Almost $8 billion would go to cities and counties. That would be split equally between the counties and the cities. And so $4 billion to the counties, $4 billion to the cities, and then it's distributed in the same formula that is used to distribute the gas tax today. So what we're seeing overall and in some of the estimates right now is that if a local gets $100,000 a year in gas tax revenue, it will almost double what they're currently getting. They'll get an additional $100,000 a year, and that is money just to go to local roads. In your handout, there was another one here tonight. Thank you, Lisa. There's a blue handout here, yes. In that blue handout, the very first column you'll see both city and counties in this area. The first column is the Highway User Tax Fund, or HUTF, which is the gas tax collected, and the distributions to each of those cities and counties. The column to the right of that is what new revenue would go if 110 passes to each of those cities and counties. That's additional money above and beyond the Highway User Tax Fund, the gas tax collected today. So first one is gallons per, cents per gallon collected and distributed. The other one would be the 110 distribution. It's pretty significant and it benefits so many. It really would help everyone statewide. How could this happen that way? One of the reasons this can happen is that 60% of all sales tax in Colorado is collected on the Front Range of Colorado, particularly around Denver metro area. 60% of all sales tax today. They have agreed, the metro mayors in Denver have agreed, they will not expect to get 60% back. They've agreed to get a lower portion back for their areas in order to help spread more of that revenue statewide. Because they do know people come to Colorado and they may come to Denver and fly into DIA, but they don't come to Denver to stay in Denver. They come to Denver to see Colorado. And they know the best thing for our economy is to get all of our roads working better and in better shape. So they really see a need to help distribute this money widely throughout the state, and it's a benefit to everybody. This is one of the few times that we have a possibility here to raise revenue for Colorado that benefits all of Colorado equally. So this is a really good chance for everyone. So this gives you an idea, just going back in history, looking at gas prices. In 2002, we paid about $1.45 a gallon. 2008, it was about $2.50, almost $3 a gallon. It was closer to $3.25. 2014, it was back up there again. 2017, it went down, and today we know it's back up around $3.19 a gallon, or at least that is what diesel is, excuse me. I think about diesel all the time because that's what I drive. But the bottom line is, no matter what the price of the gas was, we're only collecting 22 cents a gallon. So if it's $1.50, it's 22 cents a gallon collected. If it's $3.50, it's only 22 cents a gallon collected. It's the same thing with the federal gas tax, 18.4 cents. So the problem with, no matter what the price of gas is, we get the same amount of revenue every year. It doesn't change. And then the more fuel efficient cars become and the less fuel consumed, the less revenue collected. And that's the problem with our gas tax today. And this is partially why they're looking at a sales tax in lieu of just increasing the gas tax, because it's not going to be sustainable if you just add a few cents to the cents per gallon. It will continue to decline over time. So how does it get distributed? So today, our gas tax, how it's distributed, 60% goes to CDOT and about 40% goes to cities and counties. And that's how it's currently done with the current gas tax, the way we collect it. So one of the questions I want to ask some people tonight, and it's really key to this, someone tell me, how much do you pay for your cell phone every month? Does anybody know?
The two of us, $120.
$120 a month. Okay, so you pay about $120 a month. In this slide right here, on average, the Colorado resident who drives a vehicle only pays about $211 a year for their highways. So you're paying $120 a month for your cell phone, but you're only paying about $200 a year for your highways to maintain them. Yes?
Can CDOT offer cell service?
Good question. Can CDOT offer cell service? No, but we are working to try to improve that statewide through partnerships that we're doing with fiber companies. But when you think about this, you look at it, your gas tax that you pay each year, state gas tax is about $110 a year that a driver would pay to drive their car in Colorado. The federal gas tax they pay would be about $69. And on average, and please, I do understand this, your registration fees on average is about $32. Now, if I went and bought a brand new truck, it's going to be a little bit higher. But somebody that's had a vehicle for a long time, it's quite a bit less. So it's the average that we're talking about here. It's not what everybody pays straight across the board. But still, it's only about $200 a year. Okay. Next slide. This is what it was like in 1991. We were paying $1.14 a gallon. You could buy a home in Denver for $109,000. The average price of a new car was $15,000. You know, it's very different from what we have today. And part of the reason we're showing this is that today, you know, in 1991, a dollar would buy a dollar's worth of construction. Today, a dollar will only buy you about 30 cents worth of construction because the price of everything's gone up so much. We're collecting the same revenue today, but everything's about 3 times more. So we're not able to build as much road as we could in the past. Now this slide is really interesting. This slide is actually showing what the current gas tax revenue is by every state. What's the cents per gallon revenue collected by every state? So if you look at Colorado, the colors that you're seeing there are based on the last time revenue was increased in those states for transportation. So Colorado is orange. That means it's been over 25 years since we've increased our revenue for highways in Colorado. Areas that are dark blue, it was 15 to 24 years. Light blue was in the last 5 to 14 years. And states in green just increased their revenue in the last 0 to 4 years. So when you look at this, you look at Kansas, 24 cents per gallon. You look at Wyoming, 24 cents a gallon. You look at Utah, 29 cents per gallon. And I want you to look at that because when we go to the next slide, we're going to look at the quality of our roads compared to those states. This is information that was collected at a national level. The #1 state in the country for quality of roads is Kansas. Now, they collect about the same amount of taxes we do, but they don't have mountains, they don't have avalanches, they don't have the geography that we have. So their roads probably last a little bit better. They don't have the freeze-thaw cycles that we have. You go down a little bit farther, #6 is Wyoming. Wyoming's closer to us, but they don't have the population and the amount of vehicles on their roads that we do on our roads. So they're probably getting a bigger bang for the buck because they don't have as much wear and tear on their roads. Then you drop down to Utah. Utah's 16th in the country. Utah, 16th in the country, about the same size as Colorado, about the same number of lane miles as Colorado, quite a bit less population than Colorado, very similar geography, but they collect a lot more revenue than we do. They have a bigger budget than Colorado does, and they're 16th in the country. And then down towards the bottom, you'll see Colorado in orange. We are 33rd in the country for the quality of our roads. The dilemma that we've been running into over the years, I've been with CDOT for 28 years now, we used to be much higher than that. We're slowly going down in quality of our roads. And this is part of why we're looking at this. We can't sustain what we're doing now. It's going to continue to get worse. So I'm going to skip this slide right now. This slide, I'd actually have to walk away and go actually run this. But this slide actually was to depict how many fatalities we have on our roads. And I don't know, do you want to try to do that? Okay. We'll wait for just a second here. Lisa's going to go and try to push the play button for me that I can't do right now. This slide is going to show you the fatalities in Colorado from January of 2007 up through 2016. And we want you to see this because this kind of goes back to why do we have so much funding for faster safety. You know, we talked about $112 million a year goes to safety. 112 million a year goes to, there we go. Now you can start seeing all the dots forming. Every one of those dots is a fatality in Colorado, okay? And right now, we're only about 4 years into that 10-year data collection that we're looking at here. And the thing about this is you kind of look at this, and someone earlier today in another meeting, when they first saw this, and I didn't tell them what they were looking at, And they said, well, that must be all the projects you do on our highways. I wish it was, but this is all the fatalities that we have on our roadways. And it's really telling, and it's still going up, it's still moving up, and you still see dots showing up here. The thing that you see about this is that there is no single road in Colorado that is immune to this. We have a major problem with fatalities in Colorado. And that's why we put so much effort, and we put $112 million a year in trying to improve our roads and make them safer, and trying to do safety improvements, trying to manage traffic and traffic speeds on our roads. Between here and Durango a few years ago, you saw us do a restripe where we changed the passing lanes around. And part of that was to help slow traffic and calm traffic, and to give people coming from Durango to Cortez a better passing opportunity, trying to reduce some of the crashes. We added rumble strips there because we had head-on crashes that were occurring. We've made some improvements with that. I think it's helped manage traffic better. But this is what we're facing. Here's an example of what it's been like since 2013. You know, 2013, 2014, we had reduced our fatalities from 2003 and 2002 from almost 500 fatalities a year down to about 300 fatalities a year for vehicles. But now we're starting to climb again, and last year we had 427 fatalities in Colorado. You know, this is, you know, our goal is to try to keep reducing fatalities, but with the surge in the economy, the number of people moving to Colorado, cell phones impacting what we do every day and distracting people, we're fighting an uphill battle right now. But the other piece that you need to look at here is, you know, orange is motorcycles, green is pedestrians, blue, light blue is bicyclists. You just look at the pedestrians. From 2013, we had 52 fatalities in Colorado with pedestrians. Last year, we had 93. This is becoming a bigger and bigger problem, and this is where our focus is going. This is where a lot of our projects are going. When you look at Southwest Colorado and you really get into the projects that 109 and 110 will build, it's really trying to reduce crashes, trying to provide shoulders where if your car breaks down, you can actually have a safe place to pull off the road. And all those things will help bicyclists, pedestrians, etc. So this is a big area that we've been focusing on. I talked about busting a little bit before. You know, the big thing that happened many, many years ago was Greyhound and Trailways pulled out of the rural parts of Colorado, and people that don't have cars don't have good transit. They don't have the ability to do that. So that's where part of our funding as a DOT has been going to launching the Busting Out Rider program for rural parts of Colorado. You know, we've got the Durango route that now goes out over here and then on up into Grand Junction. As we keep working, hopefully we'll get a Durango connection over to Alamosa eventually. Just this year, we got Alamosa connected over to Pueblo. We got Gunnison connected to Poncha Springs, and then we have a route now from Poncha Springs up to Denver. Slowly, we're getting this connectivity back there for people that don't have vehicles. And this is going to be something we keep working towards. I think my battery's going dead. There we go. So one of the things that you can do, if you want to find out more information about what CDOT's doing, tonight I gave a bunch of people a handout that they have here and here to see what the projects are. But if you go to this website, togetherwego.codot.gov, and then it's listed up here on the screen, you go to this web page, and this is the first thing you will see. You'll see an interactive map pop up, and it shows you all the projects statewide that are proposed to be built. As you go across from where in the upper left it says statewide in orange, you go across those tabs, you get over to the far right side, and the second to the last tab is Southwest Colorado. If you go to that, it'll bring up the Southwest Colorado projects that you may be interested in. And here's an example of a few of those. It also will show you the 109 projects if you want to find out about 109. I'm showing you 110 right now as an example. One of the things that you will see, here's an example of what 109 would look like. 109, this shows a number of projects. The one thing to remember about 109, when you look in the upper right-hand corner here, $3.5 billion goes to CDOT. No funding goes to cities or counties and their roads. No funding goes to transit, bicycle, or pedestrian. All of it goes to CDOT for CDOT projects, okay? And remember, they chose the projects. They didn't really ask Region 5, okay, what would be equitable to spread some of that money elsewhere. There's one project over here in the Cortez area, which is the Toyac Passing Lanes project south of County Road G. There's some money that would go into that project if 109 passes, but most of the projects they chose were either up in Ouray County or in the La Plata, Archuleta County area. This next one, by the way, if you hear a dog barking, it's someone's phone. So Proposition 110 would generate $9 billion for CDOT, $7 billion for projects, and that's why only $7 billion is shown on this in the upper right corner. $7 billion for new projects, $2 billion would go to maintaining our assets. The counties and cities would get about $8 billion split equally between counties and cities. And then transit, bicycle, and pedestrian would get about $3 billion to help improve and really bring things forward, like improved routes for the bus staying system in rural Colorado, better transit facilities, better transit equipment for local transit programs, and then of course bicycle and pedestrian trails, etc. So, and you can kind of see here that, you know, in the blues, we really spread out the money a little bit differently based on the input and feedback we were able to give to the creators of the 110 proposal. Then also in your handout tonight, you saw the list of projects here that I gave you before, but then on the back is a fact sheet, and that fact sheet's up here on the screen. And the fact sheet just kind of goes over comparing side by side what 109 does and what 110 does, just so you get a better idea of what those are and what they'll bring to it. But it also shows you the web page also for those of you that are here tonight on where you can go to get more information about each of those individual projects that 109 and 110 would fund. One of the other things that we focus on is it's not all about just transportation. We want to focus on trying to build fiber technology into the rural parts of Colorado. That's a big, big push for Southwest Colorado, trying to get fiber in. We actually have a grant application in for Wolf Creek Pass to try to, we've got fiber to the top of Wolf Creek, but we don't have it to Pagosa yet. And if we could get a grant, and we're hoping we have a federal grant request in, we might be able to get fiber over Wolf Creek once and for all. If we get that, then I think we're going to start getting some momentum with partnerships and with telecoms going, hey, now we've got another way to get fiber into Colorado. And our goal is to get it all the way to Cortez. And ultimately, we either get it to Monticello or we get it over to Montrose to build out a fiber ring that really benefits everybody. So that's one of the elements that we're pushing for. ADA pedestrian improvements has been a big important element for us. Improving shoulders on all of our highways has been very important for us. And then of course, wildlife mitigation. Does anybody know what the #1 crash type is in Southwest Colorado? Deer and elk. Deer and elk. That is, we have more accidents with people hitting deer and elk than any other accident type in our region. And that's why it's so important to us. And that's why you see a lot of work going into putting in wildlife fencing around Southwest Colorado, wildlife underpasses. We're putting a lot of effort into that because that's our biggest crash type that we have on our roads right now. So other things that we look at is rest areas, freight projects. We've actually recently been very fortunate. We've gotten 2 freight grants to improve chain stations on our mountain passes. And we've got one project underway right now on Red Mountain Pass, Molis and Colbank Pass, and I think that's about it right now. Oh, Monarch Pass, yep. And then we're likely to get some funding for truck freight parking, and our intent is to improve the Sleeping Ute rest area and add additional freight parking there that doesn't exist right now, and then do the same thing over at Shaw Creek rest area on the other side of Wolf Creek for freight for when the mountain passes close. So then they have some refuge where the trucks can get off the highway when they need to. So there's so many things that we need to do. With that said, some of the other things are multimodal. I know Telluride is put in for some of the multimodal funding if that happens to improve their gondola. That goes between Telluride and up in Mountain Village because that is considered a transit element, similar to, instead of buses, they use a gondola. And then Durango wants to continue to improve and grow on their transit center and then doing ADA improvements over there also. So those are some of the examples of multimodal. And with that said, I'm pretty well done. Any questions? Yes, sir.
You may have explained it a lot to take into it. But in reading the information about 109 and 110, I see the words construction and maintenance. And I have a problem with borrowing money to do maintenance. Could you address that a little bit?
Okay. So the question was, gentleman was looking at both 109 and 110, and they both are focusing on construction and maintenance of our highways. And he struggles with us bonding for construction and maintenance of our highways because it's putting a burden on the future and all. And I completely understand what you're saying. One of the things that I look at, and just this is a different perspective, but if we all had to wait to save enough money to buy our house, we would never buy a house. And so you take a loan out on a home. The comparison here is if we had to wait to get all the money to build these projects, we would probably never build these projects. And so that's kind of the counter to it. I do understand what you're saying. Could we get the money, get the revenue coming in, and maybe not do bonding on it and have a bill in the future? Yes, we could. But the problem is for CDOT is we're not the ones that wrote the bill. There's other people that wrote the bills and said we're going to do bonding. So our job is to respond to that and follow the direction that's given to us. So I understand what you're saying, but it wasn't my choice. Okay, does that help answer it?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Yes?
What about any future plans to increase that gas tax?
Any future plans to increase the current gas tax? There are none that I'm aware of right now. Part of the polling that we went through recently, when the polling was done, they asked people, they said, one, do you know what the gas tax is? And the majority of the people they talked to did not know what the gas tax was. They said, do you know where highways are paid from? And people thought it might have come out of their property tax. They thought it might have come out of the tax they pay when they buy something at the store. And they didn't realize that there's a cents per gallon, and they didn't realize that's the funding that CDOT gets. The sales tax that's collected, your property tax that's collected does not go to CDOT. None of that goes there. So then they started asking people in the polling questions, okay, would you rather have the gas tax increased or would you rather have a sales tax? And the polling suggested that they would prefer to see a sales tax. And then they said, okay, now if a sales tax passed, what would you want to see happen? They said, well, one, we don't want that to be forever. So they said, under 110, and 110 is written this way now, if there's a sales tax increase and it's approved, it's only for 20 years. And if you do bonding for projects, you must pay it off within that 20-year period before the tax ends. So it was written up that way. And they said, yeah, we would like that. And they also said, we also want to know exactly what projects you're going to put that money towards. And that's why we've developed that project list that I described that's about $7 billion. And that's what has been shown to you tonight and given to you tonight. And so we kind of followed based on what we were told and the way the ballot measure was written. It was a 0.62% sales tax, 20-year sunset on that sales tax to go away, and then it must define what projects it will be spent on. And that's what we've been basically tasked with, trying to provide to the proponents that have created the ballot measure so they can deliver what they think is right for Colorado based on polling information. So I think I answered your question a lot more. Any other questions? Yes?
If 110 passes, do you know if there's any limitations or restrictions or recommendations even of how the money gets spent by cities and counties?
So the question was, if 110 were to pass, the funding that goes to the cities and counties, is there a limitation on how they could use that funding? And yes, there is a limitation that it must go to their transportation system. So very broad, it must go to transportation. So it could go to bike and ped, it could go to transit, it could go to roads and all. But I don't believe they could take it and build a new recreation facility. You know, so that's kind of the difference. You can't go and put it into a different program. It has to be transportation related.
I guess what I meant was a little bit more like, are they required to gather input from their communities to find out how people would like the money to be used?
That I'm not sure I can answer whether that is required or not. I don't believe it's required, but I can tell you that CDOT's going to ask them if this happens, do you want to partner with us with some of the new revenue you're getting so we could do more projects together? So, but that's a good question. I don't know what the exact answer is, if they're required to bring the locals and get their input on where that money goes. Yes, sir.
Not related to that, does the state have any approval authority over the local projects?
No, no, we don't. It's the same as the HUTF is today. So HUTF revenues that go to the cities and counties, they may spend on their roads as they see fit, and this will be the same. So we do not have authority to tell them how to spend their money. Okay. Any other questions? Yes?
What's the biggest opposition you've been hearing on 0901 now?
I think probably the biggest questions I've heard is people that are resistant to bonding for both of them. I can't say that, you know, and it's tough. You're asking me a question and I got to give you facts. So it's hard for me to answer that question. I can't say that I've had a lot of people telling me they like one more than the other, or that one's wrong and the other one's right. I can't really say that's happened. Most of what I've been doing is answering these other questions. I've never had anybody ask that direct question. So.
Mike, I may have missed it when you got started because I was doing other things, but could you repeat again that the state cannot advocate for one or the other, that you just want to present facts?
Yeah, so the big thing is, you know, this whole presentation tonight, the CDOT, and as an employee of Colorado, I could be thrown in jail if I take a position on any one of these. So my job is to present the facts to this and not take a position on it. Very difficult to do, but the bottom line is just to educate people and give them more information about both ballot measures without giving an opinion. So, but that's pretty much it.
So basically, we have to wait till election day to find out which direction is going. See that.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and it may be after election day. I mean, if both of them pass, it may have to go to the courts, and the courts may have to decide whether they're in conflict or not. If one passes and the other one doesn't, we'll have a clearer picture on election night. It just depends. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes.
The projects that you have listed, does it span into their 20 years?
No. No. Good question. So the question is of the projects that we've listed, and there's a lot of projects. To give you an idea of what this means for Southwest Colorado, Proposition 110 would generate about $500 million worth of projects for Southwest Colorado. On average, we spend about $35 million a year on projects in Southwest Colorado. So this is a huge shot in the arm. To ramp up $500 million is going to take a lot of work, and we're worried about contracting industry and not putting, doing so much that we can't do it because they're too busy. So we're looking at spreading 110 over about 7 to 10 years of a construction cycle, but to get it all done within 7 to 10 years. Now we have to pay it off over 20 years in the bonding, okay? Proposition 109, they actually wrote into this that we need to try to get all this money spent, and 109 for us in Southwest Colorado would mean about $237 million in projects down here. So 500 million for one, 237 for the other. But they give us about a 3-year window that we need to try to spend this out in. We're struggling right now, and we're doing some analysis, trying to figure out how we would do that in a 3-year window, statewide. One of the things that 109 kind of puts us in is, if we bond money, when you do bonds, unless there's a specific exemption in place, you must spend all that money within 3 years, or you're accountable to paying taxes to the IRS on it, okay? So we're looking at this and how do we spend that money as quickly as we can to minimize the potential of spending, having to pay taxes on the bonds. Now there is a provision that we're investigating right now where we can ask for an exemption and a waiver for a certain period of time where we don't have to do that. But we cannot ask for that until we actually issue the bonds. So we don't have the answer right now for that reason. So we need to know if 109 passes. If it does pass, how much can we spend in 3 years? How much can we not spend in 3 years to try to get it done? Probably a 3 to 5 year window with the smaller amount of money that we're talking about. And whatever that money would be in years 4 and 5, we intend to apply for a waiver from the IRS so we don't have to pay tax on our own money. So that's kind of the situation that we would have to face. But we're looking at a 5 to 10 year window depending on which ballot measure passes to get projects done. Okay? Did you have another question?
Yeah, I was just going to ask if any of these projects are shovel-ready.
Some of them are shovel-ready. Toyac passing lanes, we're actually ready right now with the intent that whether 109 passes or does not pass, we are ready to advertise that project in February of this year. So Toyac passing lanes will go in February. If 109 passes and that gives an extra $2 million to the project, we're going to make the project a little bit bigger and we can still meet the February deadline to advertise it. So we're really well set with that one. So that's a really good shovel-ready project that will happen quickly. So that's locally for 109, that's the project. So we've got some other ones around the state that are shovel-ready or very close to being shovel-ready. So, yes?
So if either one of these pass, you're going to be getting a lot of money to start working on construction, maintenance, and other things.
Mm-hmm.
Realistically, how do you feel like will you have the manforce available to work on all of these projects? And how would you go about doing that?
So we've been working with the Colorado, the question is if these pass and you get this money, do you have the manpower and the workforce staffing to be able to produce and get it out the door? So one of the questions we've been going through, and we had a litmus test from a couple years ago. A couple years ago, we had actually a large amount of funding in CDOT's coffers to the tune of about $1.2 billion. And we were asked to spend that money down very quickly. So on an average year, we would put out about $300 million worth of work, construction projects a year is what we had been doing historically. When they asked us to spend that money down, we ramped up to $750 million a year. And we've been doing $750 million of work each year up until about a year ago. And now we're actually ramping down now to about 300 million. So we've been looking at this. We've been talking with the Colorado Contractors Association because they're going, you can't put all this work out. We're not ready to ramp up for it. We can't staff up. We don't have the iron. We don't have the people. So we need to find this window. And so they're gearing up in the event this happens. We're gearing up. What we're looking at is we're probably looking at about $1 billion to $1.5 billion program a year. You know, so we went up to 750 and we were able to sustain that with industry. We might be getting closer to doubling that, and we are looking at that. The one thing that makes me a little nervous right now is we're struggling just within CDOT to find CDL drivers, commercial driver's license, people that can do over-the-road trucks, that can haul materials. A lot of our construction people have to be CDL drivers, but just snowplow operators, we're struggling with that right now. So if there's going to be a weakness in our workforce, it might be in that CDL world, but we're already having that problem today. So we'll find a way. The contracting industry will find a way. That's the one thing. There will be a way to make that happen, and we will adapt and we will find that way to make it work. But I would say it would be a good problem to have for CDOT. That, you know, we need to get more work on our roads. So, and we will find a way to make that happen. Did you have a question, sir? Nope.
No, I was just stickering at the CDO driver. We struggle with that right now.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, how is the Section 70 project going to affect this with the magnitude of people that's taking up there now in relationship to the whole state? Because we're getting requests for the I-70
To support it.
yeah.
Okay. So the question was, the gentleman asked, what's the impact of the I-70 Central 70 project, which is a $1.2 billion project that is underway right now in Denver. And the statement was that some of the locals, even down in this area, are getting requests to help go support that project up there. It's in the mix, and that was part of what we're looking at. One of the things that CDOT has been doing, when I talk about a $1.9 billion or $1.5 billion program that we may ramp up to if the ballot measure passes, that includes the Central 70 project. And what we actually do, we get down to this level of detail. Our engineers wish they didn't have to do this because it's a lot of work. But if I have a $500 million project and I'm going to build it over 2 years, we actually ask them to start giving an estimate of how much they're going to pay out every month over that 2-year period and on. So you'll see June, July, and August, big payouts going out. And then you get into December, January, maybe not that much. But what we're doing is we're asking every project, including Central 70, to do that, to look at that workload cash balance and try to keep an even keel going across the board so we don't have a huge spike to $3 billion at some point. And trying to balance that workload by a cash flow analysis so that we're stretching that work out, understanding how far out we need to do it to keep it at an even keel for the contracting industry, for CDOT, and how we manage that. And so Central 70 isn't going to get revenue from either of these bond measures because it's already funded, but it will affect the contracting industry, and we have that in our analysis. So, roundabout way to answer your question. So, it's not a simple task. It's a lot of numbers and a lot of data and that analysis to figure this out. So, but we've got it done for 110. 109 will be easier to adjust to. It's not as big a program, but we've done this analysis for 110 already because we need to be ready if this actually passes. Any other questions? Yes? That's okay.
Do you see if all these projects start going in, a reduction in the amount of fatalities that you were talking about, or an increase in that quality of roads? Are numbers going up as far as states?
To spend that much money, $7 billion, I would really hope we see an improvement, yes. I think for Southwest Colorado, just getting the shoulders out there, a lot of our projects, in Durango, we've got the interchange connection that we're going to build, and that's already funded, but it's already got plans for wildlife fencing, wildlife overpasses, wildlife underpasses. If 109 or 110 pass, that actually puts some more funding for US 550 there, where we'll do additional wildlife mitigations for that. There's other projects over on 160 that will get wildlife mitigation. And so when you start looking at this and you ask me that question, my answer is a yes for safety, because our #1 crash type is wildlife hits. And just about every project that we've got out there has wildlife mitigation identified to try to make it safer. So not every one of them, but a majority of them do, okay? So I think it will make it safer. I think it will make it better. Will it get us from 33rd up to 16th in the nation? I don't know if it'll do that on the quality of our roads, but it'll definitely improve a lot of roads, okay? So with that, I think I'm gonna call it. Thank you very much. The questions were wonderful. Thank you very much, everybody, for your questions. Please go vote. Any one of those is going to help CDOT, and we can use all the help we can get. Thank you.
Thank you.